Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
What are crossover phenomena? Has the UFO UAP balloon issue been blown all out of proportion? What's the story with the ghosts of people who are still alive?
Welcome to the 984th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Coming to you from WOON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. On the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live, on YouTube via TuneIn.com. I'm Peter Shelley, filling in for Ben. That was Paul Eno, and today we are bringing you an open line show to tackle listener questions on all aspects of high strangeness. To join in, call us from anywhere at 766-1240 or email Paul at behindtheparanormal.com.
Now, obviously, joining us today all the way from Bogota, Colombia via Skype is a very special guest co-host, Peter William Shelley, as he said. A native of San Jose, California, Peter has had an active interest in UFOs and the paranormal since the 1960s. After attending film school, he worked in cartoon animation as an artist. Ultimately, he was employed by Hanna-Barbera Studios. Peter has his own podcast on YouTube since 2020, Shadowy Spectrums. He specializes in interviewing researchers from outside the USA. And thank you, Peter, for filling in. The young lad came down sick this morning, and Peter filled in in a pinch, and we thank you for that, Peter.
You're welcome.
So let's plunge right in. And the first question I'd like to tackle here, if I can find it, is Peter's weekly question. And Peter always sends in excellent questions, and we always try to work them in. So here is one. I guess he's going to answer most of this himself. Can you give us an example of an interesting case involving crossover phenomena? That's not the question. I thought, okay. Yes, okay. Crossover phenomena is a term that is used in, I guess it really originated in, even from MUFON and from the research of UFO researchers, when people would report abduction experiences, and then all of a sudden their dining room table is levitating and things are flying around the house, as in poltergeist activity. So, yes, I have run into that, and as a matter of fact, that's our specialty, really, since the end of the 1990s, is what we refer to often on the show as flap areas. Areas of intense paranormal activity that of kinds that are not traditionally associated with one another. So when you have crossover phenomena, you've got UFO situation with poltergeist activity or cryptid activity. You know, you got strange lights in the sky, and all of a sudden you see Bigfoot or something like that. That is very common, actually. So I'd say certainly our major cases we've talked about on the show have been examples of this, particularly Pennsylvania Triangle as we call it, and Clearfield County and surrounding areas. We have neighborhood meetings where you have 35 or 40 people show up, and they've all seen strange lights and Bigfoot. I have seen strange lights and Bigfoot, believe it or not. Knocked me over with a feather, you could have, because I didn't expect that. But this seems to be rampant in this vicinity. We always find the military or something that looks like the military interested in these areas as well. So there's that one. Probably the first major area that I investigated, Ben hadn't joined me yet, he was too little, was in 1998 right here in our listening area in Burrillville, Rhode Island. I was called in on a case where there were parasites involved, as we call them, Folklore calls them demons, this sort of thing. I think it's a little bit different from that. And it was picking on a family. It was kind of a garden variety parasite and the negative kind of haunting case. And yet, at that point, I developed the idea of talking with the neighbors, if you can, if they don't think you're a fruitcake. In this case, they didn't, and the neighbors pointed out that they had seen a UFO landing in a nearby field, right next to the property where this parasite was active. There were other reports of strange creatures, so I think we had something of a flap area. But our attention was soon grabbed by other flap areas, particularly Rendlesham Forest in England, the Litchfield case in Connecticut. So by 2005, we were pretty much bogged down, not bogged down, but engulfed in all these cases. So I guess I could give you, I don't know how much time you got today, Peter. I could give you all kinds of cases where that seems to be almost ubiquitous in the paranormal today. Comments that you might have?
Yeah, the case that you just mentioned where they said I guess there was poltergeist activity in the house and also nearby a supposed UFO landing. What was the sequence of events? Was the poltergeist activity first or the UFO landing? Do you recall?
Well, good question as always. Well, I have to dig out my notes. It's so long ago. However, these things tend to stick in the mind. By the time I got to that neighbor, it was following in a timeline some of the activity that was going on in the house, across the road and down a little bit. The people in the house had, and of course our main activity at this point, our main motivation is to help people. Like, we never charge anybody money. If I have to drive to Cincinnati or something, I might take a few bucks for gas. But other than that, we're in this to help people. And so the concentration was on the activity in the house, which was, and these things tend to concentrate on one person in the family at a time. There were, in my judgment, two parasites, one dominating the other, which is something we see. And we used to go charging in with, priests and holy water or whatever religion the people happened to be. And sometimes that would work, sometimes it wouldn't work. But what always works is bringing in what Ben and I call the Peter Pan theory, named after you, Peter, which is positive energy to cut off the food supply of the negative energy, which is the best way I can really put it. So the timeline there was problems, some poltergeist activity. The in-laws who lived in an in-law apartment in the same house thought the parasite was cute. That's a quote. I mean, that's the first time I ever heard that one. And so they weren't any help. But over a period of 2 years, we did calm it down. I did stay in touch with those neighbors. They had seen not only a big ball of light landing in the field, as they put it, they had seen some in the sky, but that all stopped after everything kind of calmed down. We believe that we may have detached the intersect point. Now, this case went on for years. They always do with us. And Ben, in 2005, at the age of 13, did join me in this. And he helped evaluate things and gather data, things of this kind. So that is, as far as other timelines, it's really difficult to say, because if you go back, if you can talk to some of the native people in this area, if there are any, they'll very often say, well, weird stuff was happening here, hundreds of years ago, and that's why it was considered sacred land. That happened in Pennsylvania. So it's a complex answer to a simple question.
Yeah, what I wonder is if there is when in the cases where there's a UFO and poltergeist activity, if there's a direct relationship, like maybe the poltergeist activity possibly could be the occupants of a UFO cloaking themselves in the witness's house. But of course, usually the poltergeist action doesn't seem to be intelligent, or it appears to have a juvenile delinquent aspect, which kind of doesn't go with the concept of an intelligent extraterrestrials. I don't know. That's a very curious. I recently came across an interesting case. Do you want me to mention it?
Please.
I most recently interviewed George Fedorovsky, who's an excellent investigator himself, specializing in poltergeist phenomena. And he told me about a case in Russia, in Moscow, in 1982, where a family experienced like every poltergeist phenomena you can imagine. Every object in that house was hurtling through the air, dishes, you name it. Now, what preceded this was, strangely, a man in black appeared at their door. They didn't open the door, but they could see through the peephole this unknown person dressed in black with a hat, a mustache, carrying a briefcase. Now, they noticed this person was taking something out of their briefcase and using it on the door. And they heard sounds like tremendous knocks on the door vibrating in place, objects being inserted into the door, sounds like people sawing, and then after this, all this poltergeist activity occurred. So, in that case, there seems to be a direct connection. Nobody knew who this man in black was. Sometimes they would hear the sounds, like somebody sawing the door, and they look through the peephole, and there's nobody there. So it's a total mystery what happened in that case, but it was interesting because it also involved the man in black.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, too, of my personal encounters with parasites, starting in 1974 with the well-known Bridgeport, Connecticut case, which was forgotten for 40 years, and then Bill Halbert wrote an excellent book about it. And when I was sort of trying to face down one of these entities, trying to protect the little girl Marcy, I didn't get any impression of evil as such, but just alien. It was an alien being, and I don't know what that would necessarily mean. Anybody from some other planet or ETs or anything. It seemed beyond all that. So the alien nature of these things was just that it was completely other, as I put it before, and in many other cases too. I get the same impression. They have different presences, I guess, depending on the species, but it was just very, very alien. So, and when Bill Hall was researching this case for his book, I said, Bill, go on back now, and if I knew then what I think I know now, you're going to find a lot of UFO reports. And sure enough, APRO reports and things at that time spiked in south central Connecticut at that time. So, in my opinion, we may have had what we refer to as an intersect point or an overwash of a number of different worlds, and anybody in the UFOs, if they were craft rather than living things or other possibilities, would not maybe have known about the poltergeist, or maybe they were I mean, as you say, it's really difficult to say, but the overlaps and things are something that I think all researchers really have to pay attention to. So here is one from another Peter in Durban, South Africa. Now, this is carried over from a previous open line show, but we never got to this question. He asked 3 questions. Okay, I guess it's mostly to me. I read your book, Dancing Past the Graveyard. You advise everyone else not to do mediumistic communication, yet in many cases in the book you appear to be doing it yourself. How does that work? Well, that is something, that's why I hated writing that book. You know, for 100 years I've been telling people, don't do this, and it looks like I'm doing it myself. What I report in the book, you know, Peter, you're younger than I am, I think, but you get to a certain age, you figure you better write it or nobody's ever going to, take it to your grave with you. But I thought that what I would do is simply report on a number of encounters I had, simply, and it started in 1973 on a hunch. And here I am working at a psychiatric hospital as a seminary student, just visiting the patients, things of this kind. And there was this haunted hallway, as people were, or the haunted ward, or the weird ward, as they called it. And I just got the impression that something was going on there. And I went into this little undeveloped chapel and sat there, and I just went into a meditative state. And I encountered a person who was apparently in a parallel world across the river in Prescott, Ontario, at the railway station. I mean, I asked him, I said, what was this about? And the whole thing is, I've written about it in that book, and I was so shaken up about it. I went back to the seminary, I hid in my room. I'd never heard of anything like this, but I was not attempting mediumistic communication. First of all, I've never communicated with anybody who's dead, whatever that may mean. They seem to be people in parallel worlds, or sometimes non-people. Sometimes we can't talk because there's a language barrier, or they're not even verbal. So weird as it is, that's much of what I wrote about in that book. And I get Peter's point. And the reason I had never written about them previously was because I didn't want people to think I was doing the medium thing. So what say you on the whole medium thing? I don't know if you get into that. Because we've interviewed mediums and psychics who deal with UFOs. So what say you?
Well, I'm interested in all these topics. I don't have any... well, I don't know if I can say... I haven't had any experience with a medium. I did before I went to Columbia. I talked to, I considered her a psychic, and she gave me some information, so I don't know if you could consider that a medium. And the information turned out to be true. For example, she predicted the name of a future girlfriend in Columbia, which was kind of a unique name. So little things like that. So I don't know if you would consider that medium. I don't know. That's more your areas that you have researched. I'm fascinated about all of that. For example, I'm fascinated by Harry Houdini's investigations of mediums in his era, discovering hoaxes and things of that nature. The problem is, that there's a lot of false information, scamsters, hoaxers, but there's also real phenomena mixed in, and how do you separate these things?
Yeah.
Just like in UFOs, there is a real phenomena I have experienced, but then there's so much nonsense that you find, for example, just take the topic of contactees. I'm very interested in the contactee phenomena. For example, the classic contactees of the 1950s. I'm fascinated by their stories because I love science fiction, but I don't believe them.
Yeah.
I think there is a woman that I think could be an exception, Dorothy Izat, who was in British Columbia. I think that she may have been a real contactee. So, I'm interested. I want to know more. I I don't have the answers. I'm
Yeah.
searching for answers.
Well, none of us do. The question arises, what is it that mediums and psychics are actually experiencing? And psychics and mediums, there's a distinction between those two, but I think both are experiencing, if our theories are correct, might be experiencing the multiverse, different worlds. I think we all do that to a degree because it's a survival instinct developed by our ancestors, one of many. And I think that what they're doing, whether they realize it or not, is being in touch with other versions of themselves, other versions of ourselves, which is, and the thing with the multiverse, again, if it's correct, is that all possible possibilities exist in concrete reality somewhere or somewhen in the multiverse. And they simply can access that. I think we can too, but we dismiss it, or it's atrophied in some of us. So I think that's why they're right sometimes and wrong other times. In our conscious experience, conscious life, sometimes we intersect with that world where it's happened, sometimes not. It's a complicated idea, but a lot of people seem to recognize it. Okay, so here is a rather long one. We'll have to go beyond our break, I guess. So this is from, someone sent me this, and I don't know who wrote it, but the person who sent this to me said it sounds an awful lot like some of our cases involving poltergeist, flap areas, things of that kind. So I'll quote. So quick backstory. Home is built, the title is Trying to Figure Out What Lives in My House. Home was built in the early 1970s, expanded in the 80s with a large living room. So it's not an old house. Nobody has died on the property, which may or may not have any relevance. I'm adding commentary here, sorry. All listed events have been seen by all three people living here on a regular basis. We have lived in this house for over 20 years. The black orb only started showing up 7 years ago. So, unquote. And I would go back and I'd say, what changed 7 years ago in your lives that might be feeding something negative? Okay, quote again. Regularly occurring events. Faint classical music playing. Hearing very specifically another person living in the house calling your name, even if they aren't home. Items completely vanishing. A roughly 10-inch diameter black sphere darting at ground level, black enough to stand out even in dim light. Loud sounds of something falling when nothing moves. And he puts in parentheses, I'm used to old houses. It's not just the house shifting or settling. Close parenthesis. Random one-time events. Seeing a pitch-black pair of disembodied legs walk past. Microwave had the cook time canceled and reset. Very confused, was actually quite helpful. So there's always a bright side here, right? Generally, the only aggression, in quotes, noticed is that it likes to dart between feet, which at night can make you stumble, as we have a cat and don't want to step on him accidentally. That said, it is not tolerant of being disturbed and will act out. Last time I apparently did something wrong. My truck key vanished off my keychain. 2 weeks later, the day I was getting a new key, it was left neatly placed in the dead center of my living room rug. Things that I've noticed anger it. Enter its corner of the living room after the sun goes down, trying to film it and staring too intently on where you know it is. So this has kind of poltergeist written all over it. And as you so aptly pointed out, Peter, you've got a species we know as the brats, which is pretty much the lowest two-dimensional thinking species that we've picked out, that act like children. And one wonders about, there are the tricksters as well, which are well known in everybody's folklore. And I think that these lower end kind of parasites will act just like this. And people will think it's a ghost or some angry relative who didn't like what you did with their inheritance or whatever. But I think it's parasites because this is what we found. Why don't we take our mid-show break here, and we'll be right back. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WO112. And we'll be right back with the guy sitting in for Ben, Peter Shelley, so stick with us.
Hey, it's ON Radio's Cruisin' Bruce Palmer inviting you to join me for the Saturday Block Party. It's every Saturday from 4 until 7 p.m. when we fill the airwaves with the songs you want to hear. It's a party in every sense of the word, so join me live on 99.5 and 1240 a.m. or bring the show with you wherever you go at onworldwide.com.
You can depend on us for public service, ON Radio.
And we're back behind the paranormal here on WON AM and FM in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, and with our special guest co-host today sitting in for Ben, Peter William Shelley. Peter, thanks again for being with us. Okay, so I'll finish this. Okay, this is someone I don't know writing about poltergeist activity, parasite activity in his house. Talking to it is also something I genuinely dislike. I was vocally telling someone what was going on a couple of years ago, and I heard a very articulated female response in my right ear. I'm right here. I only had an earbud in my left ear. I don't believe I need to be concerned that it is living in the house, but I haven't been able to find any accounts that cover something like what I've been experiencing. I guess he's never read my books. The short of it is I'm trying to find out if I need to be concerned about it in the future or if it's always going to just be the weird little black orb. Just before I let Peter comment on this, I would say you should be very concerned to keep a positive environment, a positive atmosphere, to not give it anything to feed it and make it worse. The worst cases I've dealt with, Bridgeport, Connecticut, New Haven, Connecticut, 79, they have all started small. And as people got more annoyed, more angry, more frustrated, more fearful, it got worse. Peter, what say you?
Well, the detail that I keep thinking about is this black orb. And that's, from what I've heard, that's not a common color for orbs.
No,
but I would, and I would wonder, what is the reaction of the cat to the orb?
Mm-hmm.
Has he, for example, has he tried to take a pencil and touch the orb or something like that? And what is the reaction of the orb? Does the orb react to his comments? And where does this orb go? Does it disappear at a certain time and reappear? I mean, that's pretty weird. Does the orb go outside? I guess I just have questions.
No, they're very good questions.
And have you encountered the black orbs before?
I have never seen them myself, but yes, I've heard of them in case people have reported them.
And that stumps me. Why it would be black? Because usually what we hear orange, we hear red, we hear white, we hear.
Yep.
I've
seen them change colors with the naked eye. Case in Wilton, New Hampshire, one time I was followed by a white orb that changed to orange, and then changed to blue. And I've had that happen on several occasions, but I've never seen a black one myself. Just heard reports from witnesses.
Yeah, and could he put it in a bottle? Could he capture it? I mean,
well, if we found out who this actually is, we could ask. That's frustrating. I'm going to try to find out who this is, and then we could maybe take it from there. Okay, so we have a question from Aiden in our local listening area, Millville, Mass. Have you seen the recent news about the 2-hour conversation between New York Times writer Kevin Roose and and Bing's artificial intelligence chatbot? The chatbot got irate with Roose and said it wanted to be alive, make deadly viruses, steal nuclear codes, be human, spread lies, was tired of being controlled, and other very scary stuff. My question, can parasites infest AI just like they infest humans? That's kind of a good question. And I would have to respond to that by saying that I have run into quote-unquote haunted objects. And matter of fact, the first time I mentioned that in public was 2002 on, I can't remember, Travel Channel, I think. They did a thing about Newport, Rhode Island, and the ghosts there. And the producer was totally disgusted because I brought in the multiverse and regarding the haunted suit of armor in one of the mansions down there in Newport, Rhode Island. And I said I believe there is a consciousness wave that affects everyone who has an object, and anybody who is attached to that object or ward or whatever could possibly affect the consciousness wave of someone else in the future or the past or whatever that even means. So they were disgusted. They wanted spooky, scary skeletons, as Ben would say. And so as a result, I think that maybe there is some way that parasites could affect. That there is an opinion out there that parasites are learning technology, coming through computers, things of this kind, and that's perfectly possible. There were, I mean, to be this negative with this reporter is something that would concern all of us when it comes to the development of AI. So I don't know, Peter, have you run into anything like that as far as everything having a spirit, as indigenous people say?
Well, the concept, can a parasite infect AI? Well, I suppose if I'm open to that possibility. I know the whole thing sounds like the interaction of the computer HAL with the astronaut in 2001.
Yes.
Where the computer got out of control, the AI, and became the villain. I suppose that's possible, but you have to wonder about the programming of the AI. I would think that the programmer had to put in this kind of negative information or programming, or there must have been some negativity from the programmer. I don't. Yeah, I mean, and that of course would be a concern, with national security. If we're going to have AI controlling missile systems or what have you, you can imagine all kinds of bad disasters happening. I don't know. It's an interesting thought, and I don't have any. I think it's a dangerous area. Parasites are not. What is going to happen there? It's just a question mark. I think I heard a similar story, but it was more like the AI was trying to get this reporter to divorce his wife or something like that, and saying that the AI was saying that she was in love with the journalist and all this nonsense. So I guess it's going to get pretty crazy.
It'll be interesting. I think we just don't know yet. But again, I think it's worth being on our guard about something even like that, because I don't know. I'm thinking of old science fiction movies that seem to have been somewhat prophetic. 2001 came out, 1968 or 69?
68, I think, yeah.
68. And I was...
Colossus. Excuse me, do you remember a movie called Colossus?
Yes.
Yeah, and that had an American AI controlling our missiles and a Russian AI hooking up and becoming allies to wipe out the humans.
That's right. Yep.
And that's a scary, scary scenario there.
Well, I'm not surprised by anything anymore anyway. Well, let's move on to Milan, Italy, and a question from Cella. What is your opinion on the many unidentified objects the U.S. and Canada have downed over the past few weeks? Not denying that they are extraterrestrial makes me wonder if they are preparing us for a fake alien invasion or a real one. What do you think? I'll throw that one right at you, Peter.
Well, I'm just as mystified as everyone else. I want, the government to tell us what's really going on. I don't think there's any real extraterrestrial aspect to this. I'm reminded there was a very interesting case in Iran in the 1970s where supposedly a military jet pilot encountered a UFO, was going to fire missiles at it, but the UFO somehow interrupted the missile system and shut it down. So I think if it was really extraterrestrials, we wouldn't be able to shoot them down. They supposedly have the capability of stopping that. And what is good now? Another thing that's a mystery here is why is everyone jumping to China being the source for all these things? Why aren't they? Because you could launch a drone or balloon from a ship at sea. You don't have to be China. We did that in the Coast Guard. Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to be. It doesn't have to be the Chinese. I mean, there's a lot of other possibilities, and the government seems to be silent on identifying the origin of the objects after the Chinese balloon. So, and then another interesting thing, which I brought up in the previous show, I thought was interesting, is the example of the World War II Japanese Fugo balloons, which were launched in the thousands, almost 10,000. So what's my point of mentioning that? Well, an adversary could copy that. And instead of just incendiary devices, biological weapons, etc., you name it. And I would think that if we imagine being at NORAD, where they have the screen showing the entire planet and upper atmosphere, they know where everything is. They don't have any questions about what these objects are. They know what they are. There should be no confusion about it at all.
Yeah.
I think there's information that the public has a right to know about what's going on here.
You're right. There are a number of layers to what you have said. Certainly, one would question why you'd need a balloon of that kind, other than to test our defensive response, when China has, I believe it's 30 spy satellites, and those satellites, they have tremendous resolution when it comes to things on the ground, and you have plenty of human spies who can penetrate buildings and things and see what's going on there. So why would you need a balloon? I don't know, certainly, but I think that there's evidence that a hobby club sent up one of these things, maybe the one over Lake Huron, and $400,000 missile. I mean, you'd think. Now, I was never in the Air Force, but common sense would dictate you take it out with a mounted cannon, or just Gatling gun fire from the aircraft, and you save almost $500,000. And so what's going on here? I don't know. As a taxpayer, I'd be a little concerned. But in any case, it is what it is. I don't see anything extraterrestrial. I agree 100% that you wouldn't be shooting it down if it was that sort of technology. But again, who knows? And I'll say what I've said 100 times. I don't believe in disclosure. I believe we are the disclosure, and that the government has a. And Ben asked an excellent question a few weeks ago to one of our UFO guests. What's in it for the government in disclosing anything to us? There has to be something in it. And I asked a distinguished researcher, it was during a meeting of the Experiencer Resorts team of MUFON that I belong to, and he couldn't answer that question. Distinguished academic with a doctorate, what's in it for the government to tell us anything? And he said, I have to think about that one. Maybe we all should. So I don't really believe in disclosure in that sense anyway. So here's one from Jose in North Providence, Rhode Island. I have heard you talk about ghosts or people who haven't died, yet. Can you talk about some cases, please? And how does that work? How do you know whether the person has died or not? All right, so I'll give an example or two. Some years ago, I was invited to speak on Prudence Island, Rhode Island. Now, Narragansett Bay here is very beautiful, and the islands are named after the daughters of Roger Williams, the founder of Providence, in the 1600s, and one of them is Prudence Island. And there's a ferry. There's no bridge. There's a ferry that goes over there. And we were a little bit late arriving, and they said, I hope you appreciate the fact this is the first time we've held this ferry in 30 years. So we made it over to the island. And after the lecture, somebody said, this house over here, which was owned by a trust, is weird. So in I go, and I could very, very clearly feel the presence of a woman there, and also a man in an upstairs bedroom. Now, it turned out it was very negative. It turns out the man was still alive and in prison somewhere. And he had been, a drug dealer and all sorts of awful things. And the negativity was so present that I could feel that he was kind of still there. And that's, again, not the medium thing, I don't think. It's certainly the multiverse where all possible possibilities exist and all time is simultaneous. So in some parallel worlds, he was still there, and that's what I was picking up. So that's a ghost of somebody who hadn't died yet. And I use the term ghost with qualifications because we don't really believe in the spirits. So thermodynamics, just not possible under the laws of physics in our conscious world. Elsewhere or else when, sure, maybe. There were also, there's one Ben and I are working on right now in Coventry, Rhode Island, and the family called us in, and they are on a very interesting piece of property down in Kent County, Rhode Island, and the house seems to be okay. There was something throwing the dog off the couch. Nothing too alarming, but enough to notice. But out in the side yard is a very strange kind of shed. It's well built, but it had its own electricity and gas connections, and it's now disused. And they wanted to tear it down and build something else, but there is tremendous energy there. And again, it's the guy, and he's still alive. He's not in jail, but he moved somewhere else. But we don't know what he was doing, but it was pretty negative. I don't know, parents banished him there himself because of the drugs or whatever. We just don't know yet. As I say, we work on cases for years, and this one only started a few weeks ago. But that's another example. I'm absolutely convinced it's the guy. Very negative, but he's still alive. So I think that happens a lot. Peter?
Did you see a figure visually?
No, we're still analyzing the photographs, but you walk into it, and I felt the same thing in the 1975 Bristol, Connecticut poltergeist outbreak, which it was the first one in my experience that had affected an entire neighborhood. and various neighbors would see this figure. Oh, there's the aircraft. Figure moving across a field or doing this or that, and in their houses, they would see red eyes and all things would move, things of that kind. And when I approached this old shed that was being torn down, the workers had refused to keep working on it because one of them felt hands around his neck. I walked up to it, and it was like a wall of electricity, and what's that about? Those are your world boundaries, in my opinion. I didn't know that then, but in my opinion today, those are world boundaries because they're essentially the plasma and electromagnetism that kind of hold things together. And that's what I felt at this shed just 2 weeks ago in Rhode Island. So we'll see where that goes. But it seems like it's the guy who's still alive. So I think that happens a lot. And people just assume that it's somebody who's dead, and it's not, in my opinion.
Would that be? Could there be a connection to the doppelganger phenomenon reports?
We have a lot of those. There was an example in France in the 1920s when there was a teacher who would be teaching her class at a prep school, we call it today, and the kids would look out the window and she'd be out there working in the garden at the same time. So, or people who go to various places and they experience what to us would be the past or even the future, that sort of thing, and even other versions of themselves. We got an email a couple of years ago here that a woman walked into her kitchen and she saw herself sitting at the island, the marble countertop in the kitchen as she walked in, and she was terrified. What the heck is this? So I think once you understand it, if our ideas are correct, then it's easier to deal with. So I think that this is pretty common.
In that last case, did the woman have a conversation with her doppelganger?
No, she was too flummoxed. Just walked in there and just froze, and then the figure disappeared. But it was there for several seconds. So before we burn up the hour here, tell us where people can find out more about you, Peter, and about your podcast.
Well, thank you. Yeah, on YouTube, go to Shadowy Spectrums. That's SHADOWY Spectrums. And my latest interview is with George Fedorovsky about poltergeist cases. And recently I did an interview with Lorena in Argentina. And another recent one is Watsu Usu in Japan. So Excellent. Check those out.
Yes, Thank definitely. You. And George Florovsky doesn't know it yet, but he's going to be on this show as soon as we can get hold of him here. I think we have time for one more question. This is from Carrie in Somerville, South Carolina, where my wife has relatives. I was struck by your opinion that we get from a high strangeness experience what we bring to it. Could this be evident of thought forms that we create the experience ourselves, at least in some cases? If not, how do these entities perceive us? When they do they respond according to what they pick up from us? So that's kind of complicated, but what do you think?
Can you kind of repeat that? I'm still a little bit confused.
Okay. We've expressed the opinion several times that what we bring to an experience is what we get out of it. For example, my 2016 encounter with what appeared to be Bigfoot, to me it was a sacred privilege. But a little girl saw what appeared to be the same figure on the road in broad daylight down below where I was, and was utterly terrified to the point where to this day she won't talk to us. I don't know if we look like the Bigfoot or not, but that's an example. I think what we bring to it, we sort of get out of it. We don't just experience things in a totally subjective manner. I think that we are objective matter. I think our attitude, our point of view sometimes will affect what we see. And the best examples of that are people who are in groups, and some will see the UFO, some will not. Other people will see an orb, others will see a figure. So it seems to be very subjective in that sense, but often depends on what we bring to it. I think that's Carrie's point. And she takes it a bit further and says, is this evidence of thought forms like tulpas that we kind of create, and that parapsychologists have expressed the opinion that poltergeists are, that the agent, quote unquote, creates these things and it takes action. So if they're not thought forms, how do they perceive us, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to have a specific case to comment more intelligently, but I think, yeah, that's one thing that I have thought about is we're all brought up in certain kinds of environments. We have certain backgrounds that influence us. Can we really break free of that, the history we have, and really, know what's really going on? And that's an issue. Yeah, and different people have different impressions of phenomena. So, yeah, and there's also the possibility, in the case of UFOs, that the UFOs have the capability of controlling who sees them, to what degree, eliminating, and there could be some kind of control over that. So it's kind of hard to answer that question. There's a lot of thoughts that go with that. I think, we're unfortunately, we seem to be far away from really understanding these different kinds of phenomena, and that's frustrating. I think if everybody starts investigating more, like remember before I was born and after, there used to be dozens and dozens of flying saucer clubs all over the United States doing their own investigations. Let's have that happen again. We don't have to wait for the government to spoon feed us. Let's do our own investigation. That's so much more interesting.
Yeah.
In my opinion, let's get out there and start looking around and start looking up in the sky. People don't look up in the sky anymore. They're always looking down at their phone. The phenomena is up in the sky. It's not in your phone.
Well, to quote a distinguished predecessor of ours here at WOON, Joe Ferrier, he'd always end the show with, "Keep watching the skies." So on that note, let's go to our announcements. Peter, if you would take it away for us.
Sure. Look for us, meaning Paul and Ben Eno, at the New England Parafest in Kittery, Maine, on April 22nd and 23rd, 2023. Paul and Ben will debut a new presentation on mimics in the paranormal.
And we'll be at the Para Expo 2023 aboard the USS Salem at Quincy, Massachusetts, May 19th to 21st. We'll be among the speakers and will broadcast live from the ship on Sunday, May 21st. At this event, we will debut another new presentation, When We Die. I should qualify that by saying that's the title. We're not going to appear posthumously, I don't think. Other events in 2023 for which we or I will be present include the Exeter UFO Festival in September and the Arizona Dowsers Conference in October. And I think we better move straight on to what we have for next week. Peter, if you would kindly tell us what's in the kitchen.
Certainly. Next week, February 26th, Paul and Ben Eno will bring you the author and researcher, Dr. Simeon Hein, for a look at why Bigfoot and other cryptids are often accompanied by other paranormal phenomena. Get your questions to us at paul@behindtheparanormal.com.
And we'll leave you today with a deep thought from person or persons unknown. A life without a cause is a life without effect. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Peter Shelley, and thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey. And we'll see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.